What the fuck happened, guys? All right. For 2.5 years on these streams, almost 3 years on these streams, we have been we've been going over the role of drugs and the drug trade in geopolitics. Been talking about this forever. The world is shaped by drug politics in the same way that it's shaped by oil politics, pipeline politics, agriculture politics. The modern world was created by, in many respects, conflicts around the narcotics trade. If you think about China, China was the origin point of U.S. government involvement in the narcotics trade when the Department of War in the 1930s and 40s supported the development of opium by Chiang Kai-shek and the Chinese nationalists against the Maoists. Then the CIA took that over when the CIA formed in 1947. Not really took it over. It's still a junior partner to the U.S. military. But it became a covert thing, and therefore a CIA thing primarily, as well as U.S. Special Forces. Fort Bragg, as the new Seth Harp book details. China exists because of the Opium Wars. China exists because the British Empire took effectively poppy crops, narcotics, drug crops on the Afghan plains. The British Empire controlled Afghanistan in the 1800s and the 1830s, and then took Afghan poppy, cultivated it in India, and then sold it to China. And then China had such a big drug problem, they tried to outlaw drugs and the import of British opium. That there were two opium wars in the 1830s and the 1850s. That was how the British took control over Hong Kong. That was how China existed from the 1830s to the 1930s. Mao rose, and now the number one rival superpower to the U.S., who is a larger gross economy than the U.S., and is probably part of the reason that we just did this in Venezuela, because of China's interests in Venezuelan oil. China, modern China, Mao exists. His campaign was about ending the, quote, century of humiliation from the Opium Wars in the 1830s, when the British Navy bombed Canton, and when the British military took over Hong Kong and humiliated China and made it buy back all the drugs. And so we now, the British Empire, effectively the blowback from our narcotics operation created modern communist China. And the same thing, you can argue, has happened in many countries, but effectively the CIA, through Paul Hellawell, the corporate lawyer turned CIA money laundering architect, would later go on to be the general counsel for Disney and help create Disney World through shell companies, spearheaded this technique of CIA heroin laundering that continued throughout the Vietnam War. One of USAID's first activities was buying private airlines for the CIA narcotics trafficking to support Vang Pao in Cambodia and Laos, and then the drug trade with proceeds to support the Vietnamese against the Viet Cong in the Vietnam War. Concurrently with that, the U.S. government trafficked in cocaine in a huge way, really built much of almost the entirety of the commercialized cocaine network in Latin and South America, cultivating the cocoa crops in Peru and Ecuador and in Colombia, and then using those drug proceeds in laundered through Cayman Islands banks, Panamanian banks, as well as through the Vatican Bank, which was the original offshore bank before the Brits really set up the Cayman Islands, Jersey, but before the offshore banking phenomenon of the 1960s exploded after the 1957 Suez Crisis ended the British Empire. 100 from Applejack. Happy New Year, Mike. Thanks for awesome insight throughout 2025. Here's to much more in 2026. Dude, thank you so much. I really appreciate the support. That's awesome. And Happy New Year to you and your family, Applejack. And this business of the U.S. military and the U.S. intelligence services using drugs as an offset for U.S. aid, you can think of it as a sliding scale. So here's the reason I feel forced to talk about Venezuela. Let me back up a little bit. Right now, we had a lot of wins. The internet, I think, probably to you guys, certainly to me, feels much, much freer than it did a year ago. Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, X. None of my videos are getting flagged anymore. I feel pretty much like I can say whatever I want, and the only thing I need to worry about are my real life consequences, not my platform being lost for the time being. There are lots of threats from Europe. There's the balkanization happening in many countries, Canada, Brazil, UK. But the American internet right now, the Trump admin did a wonderful job cutting the grants, cutting the money spigot off. And I wasn't sure they were going to be able to do that. Now it's being laundered in different ways, unfortunately, through NATO's public diplomacy division and through these offsets being set up by the EU. But the next task for me, in addition to this continuing kind of tech diplomacy work, is taking on the NGO plex and these big institutions like the Atlantic Council, the National Endowment for Democracy, which are still being fully funded. And as I've talked about before, that one of the reasons that is a daunting task is because these places are considered critical to the Republican Party's plans in Venezuela. We covered in our last Venezuela stream about 2 months ago how the first Trump administration in 2019 tried to kidnap Maduro and failed using Jordan Goudreau in the Silvercorp coup. And everyone laughed about it at the time. Oh, Bay of Piglets, what a stupid plan. You were going to go in with a few men and kidnap the president of Venezuela. What, are you out of your mind? And then half his guys got killed and all this. Well, turns out that is possible, you know. But and now we're looking at it, and you know, I had a kind of glimmer of hope for a second where I thought, well, you know what? Now that Maduro is captured, maybe there will be less of a need for things like the National Endowment for Democracy because he's captured now. And then I remembered, oh, yeah, we have not affected regime change. Nothing inside of Venezuela has actually changed other than just the head of state being removed. You still have the entire government apparatus, the military apparatus, the hearts and minds of the people. You'll notice Maria Corina Machado the Nobel Peace Prize winner, who dedicated her Nobel Peace Prize to Donald Trump and was cultivated in the CIA spawning point of the Yale Jackson Center Maurice Greenberg World Fellows Program, the same place that cultivated our CIA assets in Bangladesh and Russia. She has not been supported by Trump in this. Let's see if I can just pull up just to show you guys what I think his quote was. She doesn't have the support of the people. What am I looking for?
Aware of the location of opposition leader Machado, and have you been in contact with her?
No, we haven't. No, we haven't.
Mr. President,
Do you have any hesitations about Machado?
Mr. President, on Monday.
Oh, I think it would be very tough for her to be the leader. She doesn't have the support within or the respect within the country. She's a very nice woman, but she doesn't have the respect to be the leader.
Guys, look. It looks badass, right? I don't know how the fuck they pulled this off. One day a movie will be done about how they just went in and president napped the president of the country with the world's largest raw supply of oil with a couple of helicopters and just did it. But the die have been cast now, and we are in for a wild ride. And we're going to go through on this stream all the different layers of holy shit. I hope you guys have a long range plan, because even this Maria Corina Machado, after we declared Juan Guaido the president in 2019, and that turned out to be a joke. After the 2024 election, we declared Maria Corina Machado the president of the country. Our formal U.S. government position was that she won 70% of the vote. K. Rob 04 says he was not the legitimate president. Well, who was? The answer we've given the world has been Maria Corina Machado.
President, on Monday.
Oh, I think it would be very tough for her to be the leader. She doesn't have the support within or the respect within the country. She's a very.
It would be tough for her to be the president because she doesn't have the support or the respect of her country. We were told 1 year ago that she won the vote. She was the president of Venezuela, the actual elected president of Venezuela. Won 70% of the vote. 1 year later, actually, she can't be in charge because she doesn't have this. So one of two things is true here. Either we lied that she won the election, or things have changed so drastically in the intervening period. So many Venezuelans have immigrated to the United States, have become refugees that 21% of the population, all Maria Corina Machado supporters, just migrated to the U.S. Trump's last act in office, his first term, was granting temporary protected status to Venezuelan refugees. And what we're getting in here, what we're going to get into as we get deeper into this tonight, is something at the heart of the Republican Party. And you guys may have seen this, but, Paul Singer, Elliott Management, hedge fund, donor drafter class on the Republican side, here's from the Wall Street Journal. Citgo is a crown jewel of Venezuela's oil industry. Elliott, is set to reap the benefits. The hedge fund could soon close its proposed takeover of the refiner. So Paul Singer, the one-time never Trump Republican mega donor, I think he was the number 2 donor to the Republican Party after the Adelsons. One second, let me pull this up. His hedge fund. So we're back to this is our sort of George Soros of the right type thing, is going to reap millions, billions, because we seized control over Citgo, one of the biggest oil companies in the world. You guys may remember Citgo gas stations. It was the crown jewel of the Venezuelan economy. They have the largest supply of oil in the world, and their state and their big oil company was Citgo. And we seized it during Trump 1. Just took the company, raided it, held it effectively, in a trust, and just auctioned it off, I believe, to Paul Singer and his hedge fund, Elliott Management. It's taking a little bit to load here. Let me see if I can find a different version. Now, the justification for seizing Citgo was the crackdown on Juan Guaido and Maria Corina Machado. That they were the real president of the country, and that Maduro had stolen Citgo from them. So we used this kind of violation of international law and human rights as the predicate for seizing Citgo. So if Maria Corina Machado doesn't have the support of the people, then how do we have Citgo? This is why so much of this is dependent on this trial is going to be insane. In a previous trial for one of Maduro's underlings, the court would not allow the jury to hear evidence that Nicolas Maduro was the legitimate president of Venezuela. I think it was Beryl Howe, Judge Beryl Howe, if you remember, would not allow the jury to hear evidence that Maduro was the actual president. It was presupposed. It was, what's the judicially ordered that it was an illegitimate president. And I see Angel X Depth, isn't Rodriguez grabbing the power there. And and that's a whole other can of worms. The Wall Street Journal would seem to suggest that she was a CIA asset. Of course, when you look at her speeches, she seems as, hardcore against the U.S. as it comes. And let's see if this loaded yet. God, that's taken a while. And so we're going to need even more of these NGOs. This is what the Republican Party will argue. We're going to need even more National Endowment for Democracy funding. We're going to need even more, pro-democracy USAID type funding, not just for Venezuela, but all of the domino effect. We're going to need it for Colombia. We're going to need it for Nicaragua. We're going to need it for Costa Rica. We're going to need it for Bolivia. So the predicate for having Citgo is like kind of destroyed by saying that Maria Corina Machado does not have the support or respect of her people. Okay, well, The only other candidate was Maduro. So who won the election then? And then the predicate for this arrest that Maduro was this drug lord, a cocaine drug lord responsible for 300,000 deaths on American streets. That's what was cited in the Air Force One interview. None of those deaths are from cocaine. Tell me, do you know anyone who's died of a cocaine overdose? I know a lot of people impacted by meth, by fent. I've known people with a coke habit. We're no longer in the crack epidemic. Crack as a street drug is just not really around very much anymore. I mean, there's cocaine, but that's like high net worth individuals. People that I know who do cocaine are like, and I'm not close friends with them, right? But I've seen this happen in some of these circles. They're like well-to-do. I mean, we saw this with Hunter Biden. I mean, say what you want about, fentanyl laced cocaine, but the fentanyl is not Colombia. That's made in labs. It's not made in Venezuela. It's in Mexico. It's made in labs in Mexico. No matter how you slice it, before we even get to the CIA part of this, we want Venezuela, and we have created a predicate to take it. Beyond that, you are being asked to hold your nose, close your eyes, stuff your ears, and go along with it because it's badass. And look, it looked badass. Holy shit. And communists suck. But oh man, this is an ugly one. It's just not true that Venezuelan cocaine is the reason kids are dying. And I don't believe it's true that Maduro was this big cocaine warlord. I just posted it on my X and my YouTube. Maduro inherited a countrywide cocaine problem in Venezuela from the Central Intelligence Agency. The cartel of the Suns claim, which was this was something that you heard the White House talk about, this cartel of the Suns. That was a CIA thing. That was the 1990s, 1992, 1993. 14 hours ago in the New York Times. Justice Department drops claim that Venezuela's cartel of the Suns is an actual group. Now, they had cited this in a previous indictment as the basis for rolling up these other Venezuelan officials. And now, and that was supposed to be the reason that we black bagged Maduro in the middle of the night. Because he ran the cartel of the Suns. But now, once we've kidnapped him and stolen his oil company and gave it to the second biggest donor in the Republican Party, we drop it as soon as he's at trial. Well, why? Because of what we watched, for example, that 1993 60 Minutes, where you had the head of the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Agency, resign in protest because the CIA had imported 1,500 kilos of cocaine from Venezuela to Miami. Venezuela was a narco state because from the 1960s through the 1990s, during the Cold War, the CIA was using the returns on these crops, the cocoa crops, and the ability to smuggle drugs through things like bananas and fruit as a way to prop up anti-communist, largely right-wing governments or insurgencies throughout Latin America. And these cartels became a powerful lever for political control. The problem is, if you assert that the cartel of the Suns is real in court, it's very difficult for the Justice Department to deny discovery to the defendant, Maduro, about the CIA's role in creating it. There's too much already out there. Imagine if the DOJ maintains the charge that he's the head of the cartel of the Suns, and the judge grants a discovery order. The Maduro says, I didn't run it, the CIA did. And here's 1,600 points of evidence. I demand, as part of my defense, all the U.S. government documents in their evidence related to the CIA and cartel of the Suns. And then the DOJ has to have a court-ordered subpoena for the CIA to disclose its entire cocaine import agency, CIA drug running in Venezuela and Colombia, right on its border. This is how we got President Bill Clinton. He was the governor of Arkansas when Mena, Arkansas was the CIA's import location for smuggling cocaine to sell for cash to buy guns for the Nicaraguan Contras and Iran-Contra. The Justice Department has backed off a dubious claim that President Nicolas Maduro, hold on a second, me. If I can hear this a little. That the Trump administration promoted last year in laying the groundwork to remove him from power in Venezuela, accusing him of leading a drug cartel called Cartel de los Sols, Cartel of the Suns. That claim traces back to a 2020 grand jury indictment of Mr. Maduro drafted by the Justice Department. This was our justification for seizing Citgo. In July 2025, copying language from it, the Treasury Department designated Cartel of the Suns as a terrorist organization. In November, Secretary Rubio ordered the State Department to do the same. Now, the Justice Department released a rewritten indictment that appears to tacitly concede that it's not real. Because they wore these patches, these sun signs on their things. The old indictment referred 32 times to the Cartel of the Suns. It describes Maduro as its leader. The new one mentions it twice and says that he, like his predecessor, participated in, protected in its patronage. So they chopped down 32 times in the centerpiece of it to twice in a passing reference. I mean, look at that. Gosh. That's crazy. 32 times, and then poof, it's gone. This was the same thing with Noriega, by the way, because the issue with Noriega, we've been told that this is just like what we do with Noriega, the Panamanian dictator. Now, he had sought to nationalize the Panama Canal, but we accused him of being a drug trafficker. So we blackbagged him, put him on trial. And what gets left out of that story is that U.S. prosecutors documented long-term CIA and U.S. military payments to Noriega. He got decades of CIA funds and U.S. military funds. Again, that CIA military drug running nexus. In January 1991, the Washington Post reported prosecutors said CIA plus U.S. military payments totaled to about $322,000 over 31 years. That's in 1991 money. Starting in 1955. For 31 years until he went bad. The whole time, Noriega, who we effectively put into office in Panama just to go against the left-wing communists, using CIA drug money. Then when he threatened to nationalize the Panama Canal, we said, oh, you're dealing drugs. That's what the CIA, that's how he made his money. That's how he rose to power. The CIA knew that. That's why they let it go on. Prosecutors list CIA Army payments to Noriega. We're going to take this bit by bit, but you'll note Noriega smuggled that money through BCCI, the Jeffrey Epstein Bank. As you'll note, for example, it says between 1971 and 1986, remember Jeffrey Epstein moved to Bear Stearns in 1976. That very year, Bear Stearns set up its BCCI accounts to clear BCCI trades. That's exactly the period that Jeffrey Epstein was working with Bear Stearns from 1976 to 1986 on the BCCI accounts, or at least that Ace Greenberg was Jeffrey Epstein's mentor, and that Jeffrey Epstein kept up with that exact same BCCI Safari Club network. BCCI was used for CIA payments to Noriega. Linda says, I'm not following tonight, Mike. You don't get the point? The point that I'm getting at here is I think the world is in a little bit of a state of shock right now about what happened with the seizure of Maduro. And he's not going home anytime soon. There will be a public trial about all this at some point. There will be intense maneuverings about the motions for discovery and every judicial ruling. This has serious impact on the world stage about our dealings with China, about our dealings with Europe. I was hoping that we would have transparency about the historical role of the U.S. government in organized crime and drug dealing in this administration. When Tulsi put up the JFK files, unredacted, I thought, holy shit, there's a chance. As I watch this, I go, chances are pretty much faded. This is rough stuff. The point here, Linda, is I don't like Maduro. Communists suck. I believe in the Monroe Doctrine. I would like Americans to get wealthy with as good a deal as possible on resources situated in foreign countries. This thing stinks. It stinks. This thing is deep blobcraft. This is a big old bag of bullshit. We're blaming Maduro for the shit that we did. This is like when we blamed China for COVID. Even though the U.S. military and CIA, the exact same players here. It was the U.S. military in 2018, the DARPA grant to create furin cleavage site inserts for a coronavirus pandemic. Moderna had the patent but before the outbreak even happened. Moderna is a spin-out of the U.S. military. The KFD 76, I'll get to yours in a sec. I just want to finish this point. The official response was China. China did this, right, from the Trump administration. Come on, man. China played a significant part in it. The U.S. military freakazoid gain of function pandemic creating research was farmed out to China. But we were the front end of that funnel. We had the military put out grants to create COVID-19 in 2018. It was done in the same lab at the Rocky Mountain Lab in Montana that was used to create Lyme disease in the 1950s, to drop on the Cubans in the 1960s, as the JFK files showed. It was funded $15 million by USAID. USAID paid the Wuhan lab $15 million to do bat-borne coronavirus gain of function work. We farmed it out there. And we had to, hold our nose, close our eyes, stuff our ears, and say, okay, well, listen, we love Trump, so this is a sensitive moment. In your heart of hearts, don't you know? One of the reasons it's been difficult getting transparency about the CIA's role in COVID. I mean, let me add this to this. I want to go over actually this Rand Paul thing now that I think about it. Rand Paul's CIA. Yeah, I think this is the one. Okay, we'll get to this. One of the reasons we couldn't get an answer about COVID origins for so long, and it only started drip, drip, drip out 2-3 years after the fact, was because that would point the finger right at the U.S. military, right at the U.S. intelligence services. Getting an answer about the origins would actually absolve China of a significant part of the blame. Not all of it, obviously. The Wuhan lab was super fucked. But we paid it to do the work. We patented the friggin' virus before it even escaped from China. And this is what I'm saying about the drug trade. I knew it was a long shot, but I was hoping, as part of the reform of this government, transparency about things. I mean, this looked like an easy political win as well. I mean, if you look at the cocaine trafficking done by the CIA out of Mena, Arkansas, Bill Clinton was the governor. Odie and I could have a Mena files. Mena, Arkansas, the Mena files. We're sorry that back in the 1980s, the CIA trafficked cocaine. But have all the files associated. Theoretically, there's a unilateral declassification power at Odie and I. Could do it if you want. But that would blow up our ability to run this op against Maduro. And it's the same thing that just happened. I mean, while this is happening, I mean, you probably saw this. While this is happening, Trump pardoned basically the U.S. government indicted the ex-president of Honduras, Juan Orlando Hernandez, He was indicted for drug trafficking, but now he's he's seen as a right-wing Trump ally. And so even though he was convicted by the Biden administration of conspiring with drug traffickers, using his government position to help hundreds of tons of cocaine enter the U.S., he was sentenced to 45 years in prison. He's been pardoned. There's a lot more evidence there than there is here. I pardoned him like last week, right? Yeah. I mean, it's like, I mean, do I need to spill in all the things right now? I mean, another one of these big drug traffickers is it appears to be Daniel Noboa in Ecuador. I was asked to, I shouldn't say this, but he's considered to be an ally of the Trump network. And so it was considered a big win when he won. I mean, sits on top of this narco empire in Ecuador, which is the main point of shipment to the West Coast of this country. But because the drugs fund the good guys in the eyes of the admin, they're protected in Ecuador. They're protected in Honduras. I mean, we saw this. They're protected in Venezuela. We went over this. Juan Guaido was also being backed by these same CIA cocaine networks. I think he was even smuggled back into the country by this narcotics gang. I know it's there. We went over this. It's on the stream that I uploaded on my X. It would have, for example, been a big win in my view. If you want to go after the Obama network, Eric Holder, all those assholes. Why did Eric Holder step down? You guys remember this asshole? Everyone goes, oh, all roads lead back to Obama. All roads lead to Obama. That's what everyone says, right? Well, who was the main henchman? Who carried out the law for Obama? It was Eric Holder. And then it was Loretta Lynch. But why? Why did Eric Holder have to step down? Anyone remember? He was covering for the CIA's drug running. Okay, that's what happened. Eric Holder stepped down in disgrace because he was held in contempt by Congress for stonewalling congressional mandated disclosures for government documents around Fast and Furious. Now, Operation Fast and Furious was a CIA, DEA, FBI, ATF, U.S. State Department interagency approved operation to run guns to the Sinaloa cartel, to take out the rival gangs, the Los Zetas. Now there are these splinter groups like this New Generation cartel. Because the Obama administration did not want to just go in and do what Trump suggested of just taking these, bombing a sovereign foreign country that's also our largest trading partner, Mexico. But they had a problem. You had the Los Zetas were doing things like Mexican cartels stealing oil. From pipelines to pockets, Mexico's cartels fuel and oil theft. Fuel smuggling in Mexico, oil theft. A multi-billion-dollar business fuels cartels.
Time now for Focus, and today we have a report from Mexico on oil theft. Generally, it's stolen under cover of darkness, but it's sold out in the open on the black market. As you'll see in this report by our team in Mexico, some of the country's biggest criminal organizations have been getting involved, and they're using bribery and violence to co-opt all sorts of officials. The epicenter of the crisis is Puebla State.
It's midday in Puebla's wholesale market. Our team has gone undercover to film an illegal activity that's costing Mexico billions of dollars. Among the goods for sale here, stolen fuel sold in...
So what they do is the same thing that we were training ISIS fighters to do in Syria. They cut open these pipelines and they steal the oil. Well, I don't know if you looked at a map lately, but as we talked about, the big power base of the Republican Party is three things: big oil, big military, big chamber of commerce. The Democrats had everything else. The Democrats had the unions. The Democrats had the media. The Democrats had Hollywood. What's created parity between the Republican and Democrat Party has been that big oil, big military, and until recently, big business have been the counterweight to everything else. So there's been relative parity. That big oil is centrally located in Texas, in Houston, and from the supply in West Texas and around the Permian Basin. Okay, also with a shout out to places like Louisiana and Oklahoma, but Texas, that's why you have the Bush dynasty. That's why you have so much that Texas is the big Republican powerhouse state. They have New York, we have Texas. Now, Texas shares these oil fields with Mexico. Chevron has huge interests in Mexican oil. ExxonMobil has huge shared interests in Mexican oil, revenue sharing, partnerships, rights. Remember, Rex Tillerson, the CEO and chairman of the board of ExxonMobil, was made the U.S. Secretary of State under Trump 1. So what happens when big Republican donors are getting their shit pilfered? Not even Republican, just big U.S. energy interests are getting their shit pilfered in Mexico by the Los Zetas cartel. Well, you can't just, Trump is kind of redefining what can and can't be done. But if you rewind the clock back 15 years to Fast and Furious, the idea of sending in the U.S. military to bomb a foreign country on its own soil in the middle of its own country, deep inland, the logistics of it. Imagine, for example, like China has got, land here in the U.S. that they own. If a gang in one of our cities goes out and attacks that Chinese farmland, and the government of China just came in with tanks and military aircraft and just bombed those gangs in our cities, we'd think of that as an act of war. Hey, what is the Chinese military doing shooting people and killing people in Chicago? So what we had to do through covert action, through U.S. military and CIA covert action, was to work with our assets in Mexico to take out the rivals in Mexico who were fucking with our shit. Republicans made a big deal about Fast and Furious, and it was a big blow to the Obama administration. They lost Eric Holder over it in disgrace. And everyone wondered, why didn't that investigation go anywhere? Why were there no indictments over Fast and Furious? We were running guns to the biggest cartel in Mexico. U.S. guns. The FBI and ATF, who were the front end of that, worked out secret agreements with gun stores in Arizona, in Queen Creek, in the exact place where Ray Epps and all these people, that whole Phoenix area, to run them over the border to the Mexican drug cartels. And that only became public because the serial numbers they ended up shooting an American Border Patrol guy. The cartels did, with U.S. guns. They traced the serial numbers, and then the gun shop said, yeah, actually, we had a secret arrangement with the FBI to not look and just give the guns. No background checks, no nothing. That turned out to be Fast and Furious. It was U.S. military, CIA. Of course, because it was carried out on the homeland, FBI and ATF had to be the front funnels for it. But it was interagency approval. So once again, guns and drugs. I mean, we could, in theory, be having a transparency effort about Fast and Furious right now. Everyone's talking about, oh, Obama. Well, the problem is, the more you get into it, imagine the scandal. All the internal documents, all the CIA eyes-only memos, all the ODNI, all of the U.S. military coordination for running guns to drug runners. Gee, do you think the people in Venezuela are going to talk about that? You think China is going to hold that up to the UN? And so even things that would be helpful, not just for reforming the country, but that would be helpful politically for the Trump admin, are impossible because of this need to maintain this lie that Maduro is a cocaine kingpin. I'm sorry. I love the admin. I support 9.9%, 9.9 out of 10 things they've done. I didn't want to talk about this, but the fact is this is not as simple a story as, smash and grab and take the oil. I mean, look, to add some levity to this, I think, look, Andrew Tate, to his credit, had a pretty funny take on this. I'm just gonna play this.
Now, why is kidnapping the president of Venezuela funny, but the wars in the Middle East I was against? I know a lot of you are confused, so listen up. I'm all for efficient imperialism. I don't like when we try and be imperialist and it doesn't work.
Efficient imperialism is a great phrase. This is something that I think a lot of people got wrong about me when they first came across my content. I'm not like an anti-imperial leftist. I have a bunch of links we're going to go over from Max Blumenthal's work on all of this, who has done heroic work in chronicling a lot of the covert CIA angles on all this stuff. But I come at it from a very different frame of reference. I'm not like a anti-imperialist leftist Marxist type. I don't believe that there's a difference between empire and the rules-based international order. In 1948, when the UN Declaration on Human Rights was formed, again, if you just go to the top of my profile and you just watch that video on the history of the intelligence state, I go through all of this from the 1940s to present. 1948, when the rules-based international order was constructed, it was supposed to end the age of empire. And all the Europeans began giving up their colonies, and There was an international human right to national sovereignty, to protection against a violation of international law to invade a country with military force and occupy it militarily. But that did not end the age of empire at all. It just forced people to lie about it. It just forced us to no longer have a viceroy, an imperial viceroy run a country. Instead, we have to call it a democratically elected or selected, or not even that, right? I mean, Zelensky is not elected. He canceled elections 5 years ago. 3 years ago. I mean, he won in 2019. It's now 2026. So it's been 7 years since there's been an election. It's supposed to be a 5-year term. I mean, Hamid Karzai was not elected by the Afghani people. Well, his brother, by the way, was the drug lord of the entire country. And under U.S. military occupation, Afghanistan went from 0% of the world's heroin to 95% of the world's heroin, all under U.S. military occupation. Now, Taliban was about 70% of the world's heroin up until the late 1990s, and then the Taliban banned poppy cultivation, and then the U.S. military took it over and then turned it into a drug field, used to support our counterinsurgency and to support our militants in the toppling of Bashar al-Assad in Syria. But I agree with this. I would rather us be honest about it and recognize the world is dirty. And that's, if there was honesty about this Venezuela thing, I could get in a place where I'd come around to it. But I don't want to be lied to that I have to believe this is about Maduro's cocaine. Give me something better than that. I mean, we just watched how the CIA constructed the entire cocaine state in Venezuela. And not only that, the CIA, not Maduro, this is 5 years before Maduro got in power. The CIA shipped at least 1,500 kilos of cocaine to Miami to be sold to Americans. We were lied to. That Noriega was the drug deal of Panama. Then it comes out as we're prosecuting him. Oh, by the way, the CIA paid him $330,000 in 1980s money. And I feel like this is going to put Trump supporters in a very tenuous position arguing this point. You know, I felt comfortable standing on business about shutting down the Global Engagement Center, standing on business about the shutdown of U.S. aid. Elon said it right. Yeah, sometimes you bite into an apple and there's a worm. Sometimes you bite into something you think it's an apple, but actually the whole thing is just worms. USA was just worms. I could defend that honestly, proudly, loudly ahead of the midterms, ahead of the 2028 election. I could say damn straight. Damn straight. We did it. Damn straight. It was a goddamn good thing. Not only that, she got a Nobel fucking Peace Prize for doing that. This is going to be a major talking point. What do you think left-wing universities are going to be saying about this? Now, they're going to be supporting Maduro because, he's an anti-Trump socialist. And when they bring that up, what are you going to say? If you know that this is not true, we'll go through the indictment here. But if you know that this is not true, that Maduro, and even the Justice Department knows it's not true because that's why the superseding indictment cuts out 30 references to the cartel of the Suns. how will you defend it? I mean, if you defend it by saying Monroe Doctrine, again, Monroe Doctrine was about stopping foreign powers from meddling in the Western Hemisphere. It's not like a right to just like black bag elected presidents in the dead of night. And you can say, listen, it's strong action and fuck international law and all that. Everybody else has said fuck international law. The EU said fuck international law. Brazil said fuck international law. But this indictment does not say fuck international law. We're rewriting the rules. It's our oil. We're taking it. Maduro's a bitch. Maduro's a shitty dancer. No, the charges, as I understand them, are that he's, if I'm getting this right, and we'll go through this indictment in a second here, Nicolas Maduro and his wife have been indicted in the Southern District of New York. Again, that's the same place that was used to gin up fake charges against Trump. Do you guys remember the Southern District of New York? That's the worst jurisdiction. The Southern District of New York was the principal place used to go after Trump and his allies. That's who went after. That's who got Rudy Giuliani. That's who got Steve Bannon. That's who got Doug Mackey. And we all complained it was long-arm jurisdiction. You know, this total bullshit to just wrangle people from out of state. Steve Bannon didn't live there. Trump didn't live there. None of them did. But they just go in and yoink. And that's the place we use for this. He's been charged with narco-terrorism conspiracy, cocaine importation conspiracy, possession of machine guns and destructive devices, conspiracy to possess machine guns. So these are the charges. Cocaine and possession of guns. He's the president of Venezuela. How is it a crime to possess machine guns? Like, I don't understand. If she in China has machine guns, we can black bag somebody else possessing machine guns? This is not chemical weapons. They didn't even bother with the Syria hoax. Oh, he's got chemical weapons. He's got weapons of mass destruction. Machine guns? What I'm saying is there will be debates about this. And at some point you are going to need to put your defense, if you're trying to support Trump or JD Vance or Secretary Rubio, not now, while everyone's giddy, but in time. And how will you defend this without lying? KFD 76 says, I think it's about the stolen 2020 election and the machines. Okay, well, why isn't that the indictment? If you got the evidence, if you got the goods on Smartmatic, which was run by I think it's the president, the head of its board of directors was Lord Malik Brown from the Open Society Foundation. The Open Society Foundation president was on the board of Smartmatic, the Venezuelan voting machine software protected by Chris Krebs and CISA for all that fuckery. That's not what he's charged with, though. You're going to have to defend this. The only way to defend it is by either lying or not knowing the truth. And not only that, when you defend this, you're ceding ground to. If you endorse this, you are endorsing by proxy everything that follows from here. You are endorsing the need for because here's the thing, we have not achieved regime change. The Venezuelan government is still in place. The Venezuelan military is still in place. The hearts and minds of the Venezuelan people are totally unchanged, except probably now more supportive of Maduro because the president just got black bagged. If China came in and black bagged Trump in the dead of night, just flew Chinese helicopters into Mar-a-Lago, black bagged him, and then put a multi-year trial, that they'll probably drag out or whatever in Chinese kangaroo court, that would probably make a lot of Americans who don't really care about China suddenly go, fuck that, USA, fuck them. And we heard Trump himself. Again, the predicate for this was that Maduro was not the real president. Maria Corina Machado was. I think that was in her Twitter bio too, right? Like, she was the president of Venezuela. And now we're saying, actually, we have so few hearts and minds that are pro-U.S. in Venezuela that even the person we said won the election, who was pro-U.S., has no support and no respect from her own countrymen or people in government. We have not regime changed Venezuela. Now, this gets to this Delcy Rodriguez issue, which is we're to be told that Delcy Rodriguez, I believe the Wall Street Journal seemed to suggest that she may have been one of the CIA sources. Hold on a second. Delcy Rodriguez's father was tortured to death by a CIA-backed Venezuelan regime led by the same families behind Machado. It's probably true. Okay, so this is one I was looking at. Sure seems like Delcy Rodriguez was the CIA source on the inside who set up Maduro and handed him to the United States. The U.S. operation to capture President Maduro at the weekend and spare him left in charge a woman Washington already knew well, Vice President Delcy Rodriguez. Rodriguez, a canny political operator, was envisioned as head of a transitional government in secret talks that her brother, Jorge, led with Washington last year about a post-Maduro future, said two people familiar with the discussions. The Trump admin had been telegraphing that they were building this transition around Delcy for some time now, said an investor in Venezuela. They don't see her as being a lapdog, but she was always the one who was most constructive in all the negotiations with the U.S. And her brother was in secret talks, according to, I think this is Wall Street Journal. Now that's, if you look at, I mean, if that is true, because this is what all the left-wing blogs are speculating, that she was the one. So, I mean, she rails against the U.S. in all of her talks, but now she's going to be the president of Venezuela. I mean, she's like a hardcore firebrand, it seems, from all these talks you see of her. And evidently her father was tortured or killed by the CIA-backed pre-Hugo Chavez regime, if that's true. I know that she controls a lot of business interests in Venezuela. But it might be true that despite her tough talk, she's more open to doing business, privatizing certain industries, giving government contracts to U.S. and British and Spanish firms. And that may be the end goal here, is not a full-scale regime change in the classical sense, not a military coup or a color revolution, but rather simply putting a different person as the head of state simply by taking out the top person, because that next person is believed to be better for business and will make compromises. So not really a full vassal state like you get in a military coup or a color revolution, but rather something that moves the ball forward. the rights to certain oil and minerals in exchange for the alleviation of certain sanctions. That may be how things settle, and in which case it's very cheap. You know, it's not a U.S. military occupation. It's not us needing to fund 1 billion NGOs to do it. But it's dirty when you do it on these grounds. Now, this is another thing, is like a lot of these activities that are going on right now. Trump bombed Nigeria right before he did this. And we've got special operations going on in Somalia. Everywhere you have these operations, you have masses and masses of protected immigrants, protected by the Justice Department, protected by the media and the Pentagon media. We went over this a million times with the Columbus, Ohio being the launch point for the U.S. war interference in the civil war in Somalia. And then Columbus, Ohio becomes the second largest Somali population in the United States. And then we use the remittance proceeds to fund our side, the CIA-backed side of the Civil War. And we saw this in Afghanistan. It wasn't until that Afghan guy shot 2 National Guard members that we shut down the Afghan immigration issues. But the Afghan situation is the same. Afghanistan is a drug zone since the early 1800s. In theory, you could go after the whole Biden family for narco trafficking, for cultivating, and Obama, and all the way back to the Bushes, for the scandal of creating a narco state, the same one they accused Maduro of doing for cocaine, but doing that for poppy and heroin and opium in Afghanistan. But again, we're back to this COVID thing. You have to. The world is a dirty place. As I said, the night that the USAID shutdown was announced in February of last year, the goal is not to end U.S. soft power. It's to make it a little bit more honest. And I don't like the dishonesty of this, but I guess no other predicate was possible. And the time was ripe. So I just want to read a little bit of this because I haven't actually read it yet. For over 25 years, leaders of Venezuela have abused their position of public trust and corrupted once legitimate institutions to import tons of cocaine to the U.S. And if you remember, again, it's at the top of my feed right now on X. We watched as not only did the CIA run the cocaine trade inside of Venezuela, not only did they set it up with the Venezuelan military, but then the CIA threatened any CIA insiders to stop them from talking to the press about it. Nicolas Maduro is at the forefront of the corruption that has partnered with co-conspirators to use his illegally obtained authority and the institutions he corroded to transport thousands of tons of cocaine to the U.S. Illegally obtained authority. So they're saying Maria Corina Machado is actually the rightful president. Right? Because there was an election last year, 2024. It was Maria Corina Machado versus Maduro. We're not calling, because if indeed the plan was to get Delcy Rodriguez as head of state, as she now is, if Trump endorses Maria Corina Machado, he's just pissed off who he hopes to be his main trading partner. I mean, how do I defend this in light of throwing Maria Corina Machado under the bus? S.A. Weld says, chill on the criticism. We don't know yet, Mike. I'm not. Again, I think this is a fantastic administration, but I call it as I see it. Okay, this is not like an election. This is not like a presidential election year where you need to kind of like I'm running into these dynamics talking to people in the admin. We lost the fight to shut down the National Endowment for Democracy. We lost that fight. IRI, NDI, Solidarity, all these. And I watched this happen in Trump 1 as well, where bit by bit, the system gets its hooks in people, even good people. You go along to get along because you've got friends. And every friend of yours has a different sacred cow, special interest, something you don't fuck with. And you make enough friends, and suddenly you don't fuck with any of them. You don't fuck with any sacred cow. And then you are a system guy yourself. And that's not me. Okay, so, all right, says that he provided diplomatic passports to drug traffickers. Again, he's the head of state, though. As Venezuela's president and now de facto ruler, I guess they're saying he's president, but he got it illegally by stealing the election. I guess that's the implication. He now sits atop a corrupt, illegitimate government. Has leveraged government power to... Again, there is drug trafficking, but these networks, it's like they're charging him with not getting rid of the cocaine state constructed by the CIA. Okay, so saying that he's gotten powerful and rich off of a cocaine network underneath of him. Okay, yeah, the FARC, Nicaragua, the Sinaloa cartel. They said they partnered with narco-terrorists like the Sinaloa cartel. By the way, this is why you can't get transparency around Jeffrey Epstein, too. Okay, so if you're telling me, hey, chill. Hey, chill, Benz. Stop with the criticism. Okay, did you have any criticism about the Jeffrey Epstein stuff? Well, guess what? Epstein was a drug trafficker. Rolling Stone. Was Jeffrey Epstein a spy? Told several people that he was making a fortune out of arms, drugs, and diamonds. As we've covered, all the illicit CIA weapons trades at BCCI that Bear Stearns was facilitating and clearing. The Adnan Khashoggi, the Douglas Lease, the Ehud Barak, all the arms. Well, it's also the drugs. If you remember, when Ghislaine Maxwell was interviewed by the Justice Department under oath for a sit-down interview from prison, she was asked directly by the DOJ's Todd Blanche to give an example of the kind of business transactions Jeffrey Epstein would do. And she says, so let's say you have El Chapo. Oh, God, don't know where he comes from. But anyway, we've got El Chapo. And El Chapo's laundering money, or he's working with the Sinaloa cartel, and he steals money from the Sinaloa cartel and he moves it to wherever. So he's got stolen money from the Sinaloa cartel. And then Ghislaine Maxwell continues and says, just coming up with something in my head. And the Sinaloa says to Jeffrey Epstein, can you track down my $1 billion that the other cartel stole from me? And Epstein would go and find the $1 billion and take a portion of the money that was stolen at a fee on a percentage basis. Now, I just told you that during Operation Fast and Furious under the Obama administration, the CIA cut a deal with the Sinaloa cartel. The CIA was partnered with the Sinaloa cartel. Ghislaine Maxwell, the example she gives of Jeffrey Epstein's business is Jeffrey Epstein being partnered with the Sinaloa cartel, while the CIA is partnered with the Sinaloa cartel. And what am I forced to accept in this indictment? That Maduro's crime is that he partnered with narcos from the Sinaloa cartel. What am I supposed to do with this? Then declassify every CIA document about the Sinaloa cartel, because it sounds like the CIA was working with the Sinaloa cartel. It sounds like Jeffrey Epstein was working with the Sinaloa cartel. If the enemy here is the Sinaloa cartel, how come we've got no transparency from our own spy agencies who cut a deal with the Sinaloa cartel to give them immunity? This is the testimony in court. Let me read this to you. Fox News reporting this in 2011. U.S. agents cut deal with Mexican drug cartel, court documents say. U.S. federal agents allegedly cut a deal with the Sinaloa drug cartel that allowed it to traffic tons of narcotics across the border. The allegations are made by Vicente Zambada Nieble, a top-ranking cartel boss extradited to the U.S. last year on drug charges. He's a close associate of El Chapo. Oh, that's funny, because this is exactly who Ghislaine Maxwell gave the example of Jeffrey Epstein's business model. Working with El Chapo and the Sinaloas. The deal allegedly began with Humberto Loya Castro, a Sinaloa cartel lawyer who became an informant for the DEA after a drug case was dismissed in 2008. So they charged him with narco trafficking. Then the Justice Department dismissed the case and struck a secret deal for divide and conquer to support the Sinaloa cartel against the Zetas, a new generation. Where the U.S., the secret deal, so they dismissed the charges against this is Fox News reporting this. So Sinaloa cartel quarterback, they strike a secret deal where the U.S. will help finance and arm the Sinaloa cartel through Operation Fast and Furious to dismantle rival cartels. And Mexico is where the actual drug deaths are coming from. Mexico is where the fentanyl is cooked. Mexico is where the meth is cooked. I can't close my eyes and just lie to myself that this is anything to do with stopping drugs. It doesn't. Venezuela is not the main way that drugs come here. Ecuador is. But we like the president of Ecuador, Daniel Noboa, despite him personally sitting atop Noboa Trading, which has been busted like a dozen times, trafficking cocaine using bananas. But because we like him, the drug money is good money. It's capacity building of our assets in Ecuador and throughout the region. Here's the court motion in this case. The U.S. government entered into a conspiracy with one of the largest drug cartels in the world. Government has acknowledged that agents knew that Loya Castro was meeting on a regular, if not daily basis with El Chapo, Mayo, and other leaders of the cartel. Yet the DEA and other government agents never used him to locate them. Loya Castro sat in on meetings with DEA agents in which they discussed DEA operations and alerted him when Mexican authorities were conducting investigations which could endanger the cartel's leaders. So the DEA, which is just an arm of the CIA, if you read any books on this, you'll know what I'm talking about. The DEA, CIA would give the Sinaloa's main lawyer, who met on a daily basis with El Chapo, a heads up when Mexican authorities were conducting investigations into the heads of the Sinaloa cartel. So the DEA and CIA were working with the Sinaloa cartel's lawyer quarterback to alert them whenever the Mexican authorities were looking into the cartel bosses. And then you end up with a string of these Mexican authorities getting assassinated. Were they assassinated because they were tipped off by the CIA that those Mexican officials were investigating them? And on the Jeffrey Epstein front, we covered this. I'm going to pull up a couple things here. Oh, and by the way, I should note, Juan Guaido was one of the largest single recipients of U.S. aid support. You see him below with members of the Colombian narco cartel who assisted USAID's, the Venezuela aid stunt here. Juan Guaido and USAID. Now we're going to try to do this in Colombia too, because the Gustavo, the head of Colombia, sucks also. There's this axis: Brazil, Colombia, and Venezuela. Colombia changed government in 2022 to this hard leftist. I don't like him. I want him out. But the idea, he's actually trying to shut down a lot of the cocaine stuff that was set up by George Bush in the 1960s, when George Bush was a CIA company man. Colombia inherited that cocaine problem. There are so many ways to go after these people for the fucked up shit they do. But we're using this bullshit predicate because that's what allows you to break out the heavy guns. So I'm going to need to hold my nose when we go after because Trump said that about Colombia, right? Didn't he say that about Colombia, whether or not he's next?
Colombia, and that's Venezuela, is very sick. Colombia is very sick too, run by a sick man who likes making cocaine and selling it to the United States.
Come on. It's since the 1960s, the U.S. military and CIA have used Colombia as the base of operations for the entire cocaine trade in the Western Hemisphere. The idea that the president who got into office in 2022 set that up, that's a tough pill to swallow. George H.W. Bush, was doing coke jobs in Colombia. The whole Venezuelan opposition was backed by Colombian CIA cocaine money. Anti-drug unit of CIA sent a ton of cocaine to the U.S. I know I put that link. But Juan Guaido, Maria Corina Machado, Leopoldo Lopez, that whole network is Colombian cocaine gangs. It's like with the universities. There's so many ways to go after the universities. And they did like the anti-Semitism thing. It's like, well, now you're creating this predicate where it's like, okay, so hate speech is the reason? Not for all the CIA gay ops that they do, not for the Russiagate bullshit, not for the shadow diplomacy. So, but anyway, what Trump says here is,
man who likes making cocaine and selling it to the United States, and he's not going to be doing it very long, let me tell you.
What does that mean? He's not going to be doing it very long.
He's not doing it very long. He has cocaine mills and cocaine factories. He's not going to be doing it very long.
So there will be an operation by the U.S.
It sounds good to me.
Secretary Rubio mentioned.
You know why? Because they kill a lot of people. Yeah.
it sounds good to me. We should black bag the president of Colombia for the CIA's cocaine trade. I mean, this is what we did in Afghanistan, guys. How do we get bogged down in 20 years in Afghanistan? Afghanistan did not attack us on 9/11. And it wasn't about getting Osama bin Laden. We let Osama bin Laden go. The number 3 at the Pentagon confessed that in 2005, 4 years after, we let Osama bin Laden go in Tora Bora. We had him cornered, but we let him go because getting him would end the predicate for being there. And we said, well, they're harboring terrorists. Well, we created those terrorists. We've been over this a million times. The CIA and the U.S. military created the Mujahideen. in the 1970s to try to get rid of the pro-Soviet government, get rid of the Soviet incursion, where we want to create a Russian Vietnam in Afghanistan. So we created the Mujahideen. And it was a covert action, and it was dirty work, and it was the same BCCI network that funded Noriega. Ran through BCCI, administered by Bear Stearns, while Jeffrey Epstein was there. Well, Jeffrey Epstein says he made his money off of guns, drugs, and diamonds, another drug-like smuggling form. And we're still in Afghanistan, by the way. I know we pulled out, but we still have operations in Afghanistan. And you're going to, and it will light back up. But it's like, so killing the terrorists that we created, if they even are vaguely responsible for 9/11, which they weren't, going after the cocaine trade that we set up, well, where's the internal responsibility? I'm okay with this if you say, listen, the CIA and the US military set this up, but they continued it and they escalated it. We're getting rid of it on our side, and we need to punish the people on their side who participated. That's a compromise I'm cool with. Then I'm like, okay, based. We're going to get the internal files about U.S. military narco trafficking in Afghanistan, about U.S. military and CIA narco trafficking in Colombia, and all the different Obama administration officials, Bush administration officials, Biden administration officials who did this. I'm okay, for example, of saying China's at fault for COVID for participating in a rogue U.S. military gain of function operation. But to leave us completely out of it and to watch people I know and love and respect just kind of go along with it even when they know, like, that ain't true, though. You can do that. Blame it on the Biden administration and the Obama administration and rogue people inside your own military and CIA who double-crossed you during Trump 1. Trump got destroyed by his own military and CIA in Trump 1. From the impeachment on down. They lied to him about the troops and what they were doing in Syria. We were constantly playing shell games with the numbers, the general said afterwards. Throw them under the bus. And if you want to roll up Maduro and Colombia in that, okay, I can defend that. I can defend that. Now, I like the Trump administration very much. I don't think Max Blumenthal does. Even though I respect Max Blumenthal as a journalist, we've got different political views. What do I do in a debate with Max Blumenthal? These are the kind of things I think about in the shower. Who should be president in 2028? And let's say he comes out and says, Gavin Newsom, because the Trump administration is corrupt. And I say J.D. Vance or Marco Rubio, because they did such a great job in the last term. And he goes, how can you defend? You know, for all you talk about with regime change wars and covert ops and blob profiteering, how can you defend the kidnapping in the dead of night of the head of state of a foreign country on such bullshit charges? What do I do in that debate? I can sidestep it and say there are more important things. The number one threat was the censorship industrial complex. Look at the economy soared through the roof. And then he goes, okay, let's get back to this. Do you support black bagging people and then hitting them with trumped up charges? I thought that's what you didn't like that they did to Trump, that they hit Trump with 191 bullshit charges in the Southern District of New York. I don't know what I'd say there. And not only that, you're like giving a huge win to these elements of the Republican swamp. And you're protecting all of their DNC allies. Again, the 2019 operation, we covered this. Nestor Sainz, who organized the first attempt to kidnap Maduro in 2019 under Trump 1. Who did Trump 1 use for that? Nestor Sainz from the NDI, from the DNC branch of the CIA. So if you want to go after NDI, now you're hitting your friends who are helping you in Venezuela. And the Jeffrey Epstein stuff is one of these things. I want to get to this next. I want to actually do some live research. High-ranking cartel member says Fast and Furious was meant to supply guns to the Sinaloa cartel. That's what we covered. Let me make another thing of tea, and I am going to just put on at the same time. Okay, so like this analysis, you can see the obvious benefits if we do this, right? Like I'll just play this video.
After capturing Nicolas Maduro and transporting him to a U.S. federal prison to face charges, Trump announced the U.S. will run the country until a safe transition is possible. But what if the U.S. never leaves? The Petro reset breaks OPEC's global price monopoly. By seizing Venezuela's 300 billion barrels of oil, the world's largest reserves, the U.S. crashes gas prices to a historic $1 at the pump. This logistics miracle slashes shipping costs by 70%, cutting the price of groceries and goods by 30% overnight. Inflation vanishes as the energy tax is deleted, triggering a surge in domestic manufacturing. The currency collapse is solved by replacing the bolivar with the US dollar, stabilizing cost while zeroing savings. As a migration reverse brings 7.7 million refugees back to rebuild $400 billion in decaying infrastructure. The Southern Command expansion dismantles gangs and rebels, cutting crime by 90% as Venezuela becomes a de facto 51st state. This superpower pivot evicts Russia and China, freezing $60 billion in debt and granting the U.S. total military and economic hegemony over South America.
Okay, that's like the miracle best case scenario. But seeing it all together like that, you understand the strategic logic, but you also understand the strategic logic of taking over the Middle East after 9/11 on BS grounds. Like, why did we what, 15 of the 19 hijackers had Saudi passports, while John Brennan, CIA Director John Brennan, was the CIA Chief of Station in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia during that same time period. We never went after Saudi Arabia. Funny that. Instead, we used a BS predicate to go after everybody else that we wanted to go after anyway. And that's what's happening here. It's like this, you know, I am a realist about this. I mean, getting back to Tate's analysis.
And we end up spending 10 years and $25 trillion and losing loads of soldiers and getting bogged down in some bullshit. But I do like when in 45 minutes, we kidnap a nigger and get $17 trillion of oil. I like shit that works. I'm not against stealing shit. I'm from the streets. Are we all gonna fucking sit around and cry, pretend this is the first time a nigger got kidnapped for money? In fact, I would argue that's the only reason anyone gets kidnapped. There's kidnappings going on right now in every city in the world. Some crypto kid just got kidnapped in Paris. Some fucking dude is kidnapped in Minneapolis. Kidnapping happens. If you got shit, you got to be able to protect it, or someone's going to fucking kidnap your ass. That's how it works. and they take your shit. This is the streets. Now, if we were to say boots on the ground in Venezuela, 10-year, 25 trillion money laundering war bullshit, I'm against that. I am totally against us trying to run Venezuela. When Trump's like, yeah, we're going to run the country now. Now, fuck that. We're not going to run nothing. Take their shit and bounce, bruv. Take the oil and go.
Okay, so Lottie presents Angel Depp. You guys are saying Tate, really? And Tate's regardless of what you think about Andrew Tate, what he's articulating in this video is the only possible theoretical defense I can think of that doesn't involve lying. Go ahead. Make an argument for doing this that is not Andrew Tate's argument here without lying. I'm going to wait for you in the chat while I keep playing this.
That's it. For Uncle Sam, take their shit and let's fucking leave. Now, I know a lot of you are saying, well, actually, quite a lot of Venezuelans are glad Maduro's gone because a lot of the Venezuelans were mistreated. I want to make something very fucking clear. I don't give a shit what any Venezuelan thinks about anything.
And with the rejection of Maria Corina Machado, who we said that Maduro stole the election from, I mean, he's articulating here the primal id of the justification for doing this. You know, this is not about cocaine. Then how do you pardon the president of Honduras? How do you prop up Daniel Noboa in Ecuador? How do you explain the CIA creating the entire Venezuela-Colombia cocaine network? How do you defend them cultivating the cocoa fields and distributing, packaging, transporting for 40, 50 years? The only way to defend this is an argument like this. And then all bets are off. I mean, if there was a better predicate, maybe. If it was, but this is ugly. I mean, you're selling it off to Paul Singer. Paul Singer's hedge fund. I mean, just so you guys see how Paul Singer operates on this. Hold on a second.
This investor is so powerful, entire countries are afraid of him. Paul Singer has been nicknamed the Doomsday Investor. He first worked as an attorney at a bank where he created the formula that explains his $70 billion hedge fund, Elliott Management. With a focus on buying distressed assets, Paul's genius came in the form of exploiting weakness. He never targeted small companies, though. Paul went after entire governments. In the 90s, he bought $11 million worth of defaulted Peruvian debt. And when the country's corrupt president tried to flee, Paul confiscated his jet and returned it only on the condition he was paid $58 million from the country's treasury. He did it again with Argentina in 2000, suing the government to pay him $2.4 billion 16 years later after buying its debt. He's also made quite a bit of money from the US government. Sensing an inevitable bailout of the auto industry in 2008, he bought a stake in the bankrupt Delphi Automotive Company, a crucial part supplier to the industry. Not long after, the government paid $12.9 billion to buy it from him. Outside of business, Singer owns famous Italian football club AC Milan. He seized it after its owner defaulted on a loan payment owed to him. This investor...
I mean, this is George Soros style of the Republican Party, just straight vulture. I mean, when you talk about Confessions of an Economic Hitman and how debt trap diplomacy ties in with hedge fund profits, you know, you do these high interest loans and then you have the CIA economically destabilize a country and have the Treasury sanction the country, and then they can't afford to pay back the loan, and then the hedge fund just seizes the assets. That's the shit George Soros does on the left. It's the shit Paul Singer does on the right. And he's bankrolled. He became he hated Trump in 2016, but then when Trump turned internationalist, he became a big booster. backs, Lindsey Graham and Rubio and all these guys. And it's like, the justification for seizing Citgo was a lie. And now we're sort of acknowledging it's a lie. And yet you're still giving it to him. Paul Singer is how you get Lindsey Graham. Trump can't run again. Paul Singer is how you get Nikki Haley. Paul Singer is how you could get Bill Kristol as a Republican president. And it's hard to watch this. Again, the only thing I could envision is an Andrew Tate-like argument where you say, listen, if we get all the Venezuelan oil, it will make us richer. It will make our standard of life better. It will improve our lives. And it probably would. If there's a trickle down, what if there's not trickle down? What if it just goes to Elliott Management and Paul Singer, and he just uses that money to revive Nikki Haley's career? Then where are we in 2028? Now on that front, so what I'm getting at here is not only is there the direct thing about Venezuela, but I wouldn't be spending so much time on this tonight if this was just Venezuela. My issue here is these are noble lies that we are forced to be good little boys and girls and accept. And, noble lies are noble in the moment. They're a crisis management technique. But as the years drag on, the reason you need them in the first place, as that goes away, you're left with this ugly residue and then this labyrinth of state secrets. The U.S. involvement in illegal drug trade, the narcotics trafficking, the reason that we're said to be going after Maduro is why we were in Afghanistan. It's why we're part of the reason we were in. It's the reason BCCI was set up. It's the reason Jeffrey Epstein got his start in the business. It's part and parcel with all of these disinformation groups. The Afghan insurrection in the 1960s and the toppling of the Russia-aligned Afghan government was done through the Asia Foundation. These are drug proceeds in the 70s through the CIA's BCCI Bank, and they were directed by the Asia Foundation, which was set up by the CIA. And then when they got busted for their CIA funding by Ramparts magazine, they transitioned over to USAID funding. It's the same thing on just the slow pace of transparency with things like COVID. This is from October 30th, Rand Paul. I've sent a letter to ODNI after uncovering new records showing U.S. intelligence was in contact with coronavirus researcher Ralph Baric as early as 2015. The documents I released today reveal U.S. intelligence officials were in contact with Dr. Ralph Baric, a collaborator of the Washington Institute of Virology's Dr. Zheng Li, this bat lady. Remember the Dr. Zheng Li, the bat lady? Years before the pandemic. In September 2015, the CIA and ODNI reached out to Ralph Baric. We learned this in October 2025. It's called COVID-19 because this happened in December 2019 or possibly October 2019. 6 years it took to learn about the CIA and Director of National Intelligence reaching out to Ralph Baric to discuss a possible project on coronavirus evolution and human adaptation. The CIA and Ralph Baric about a possible project to gain of function, adapt a SARS-like coronavirus cluster to humans. Less than 2 months after Ralph Baric met with the CIA to discuss this possible project, to do gain of function work on coronaviruses to adapt them to humans. Ralph Baric and the Chinese bat lady Xi published a SARS-like cluster of circulating bat coronaviruses, shows potential for human emergence. Research funded through USAID's PREDICT program. So the CIA talks with Ralph Baric, who's implicated in this whole COVID-19 stuff. He works with the China side of it. It's funded by USAID. And the official position of the admin is China. Xi. We're just like, because when you stake out that line, you prevent independent researchers who like the administration from looking at this side of it. This is a great example of it, okay? Here's the China side. Here's our own corrupt government. We're being told only look at this side of it. Don't look at this side of it. Even though 5/6 of it is our own corrupt government, look at this. And in fact, if you prove your case about this and run it down and do find incriminating documents about this, the more you do that, the more it hurts this argument. So what ends up happening? The gears and the bureaucracy of the admin stop you from looking into this. You'll find the blob will be slow in responding to your transparency requests. You find the people on the Hill who were excited before just don't get back to you. You'll find there's some weird person in the general counsel's office or, in an ethics board somewhere who just put the kibosh on it. In 2018, Baric and Xi were again listed as collaborators on EcoHealth's diffused proposal to DARPA, which sought to insert a furin cleavage site into a coronavirus, the same feature that appeared in COVID-19. In January 2020, Ralph Baric was summoned by the Director of National Intelligence, who oversees the CIA, to brief officials on shared slides titled Origins, discussing a possible accidental lab release to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. So the CIA was secretly meeting in January 2020 with Ralph Baric to discuss the origins. He's traveling to Montana, by the way, it says. So I'm saying I'm running into this at a lot of layers, I feel, in the admin right now. And even on the Epstein stuff. We've talked so much about the CIA and Jeffrey Epstein. And with that, I want to get to a little bit of research. Because we were talking about Noriega and Panama. Now let's see, just switch up the vibe a little bit. Let me see if I can just find something. Panama, Noriega, arrest. Just go back in time.
CBS News Special Report. From CBS News headquarters in New York, here is Dan Rather.
This is December 1989.
Good morning. By dawn's early light in Panama, U.S. soldiers supported by tanks and aircraft are on the attack. The main target, apparently, the Panamanian Defense Barracks, normally Manuel Noriega's headquarters. The action is not over. Casualties are reported heavy. We do not yet have any official count. The fighting has closed the Panama Canal for the first time in 75 years. As for Noriega, we simply don't know where he is, whether he's holed up, slipped the noose, dead, or what. We simply don't know.
In 50 from I Am Dame, VZ, Venezuela, is also origin of alleged dodgy voting machines. Trump made posts right after the op. Well, this is what I'm saying. But if that's the case, why isn't that what the indictment's about? I mean, you're talking about Smartmatic, which, as we discussed, is fishy as fuck. Venezuelan communist, sketchy elections. On its board is Lord Malik Brown, the president of the Open Society Foundation at the time. Ian Dean said, and that may be why this is a negotiated surrender. I mean, I don't. Is it a negotiated surrender? I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of intrigue. We'll be learning more as it drags on. Let's see George Bush's speech here.
Today, forces under service to protect the
mission, the U.S. military attack, what the Panamanians call the invasion of their country, that is Noriega's faction of the Panamanians calls the invasion of the country, continues. It has a number of missions. First and foremost was to find Noriega and, if possible, bring him back alive, that is, bring him back to the United States to face the criminal drug charge indictment that was handed down by a grand jury in Miami. But there were other goals of the mission: to install a democratically elected government, to bring stability to the country, to protect American citizens. All of those are reasons that have already been given by the White House in its official statements as to why this military action has been undertaken. We go now live as part of our CBS News special coverage and part of our CBS This Morning coverage to the President of the United States addressing the nation on the action in Panama from the Oval Office.
For nearly 2 years, the United States, the nations of Latin America and the Caribbean have worked together to resolve the crisis in Panama. The goals of the United States have been to safeguard the lives of Americans, to defend democracy in Panama, to combat drug trafficking, and to protect the integrity of the Panama Canal Treaty. Many attempts have been made to resolve this crisis through diplomacy.
Only one of those things is real. The Panama Canal Treaty. That's it. Everything else there was a lie. Everything else there was an excuse to get to the last one. This is an example of the scorpion's tail. Bunch of little things, and then right at the end is what they're really doing. And you can make an argument. Listen, don't fuck with the Panama Canal. But technically, if they have a legal right to do it, you need to create some other bullshit predicate charge in order to take the person out and induce a regime change. Same thing there as with here. The idea that Noriega was a drug trafficker. Yeah, he was a CIA drug trafficker. That's why the CIA installed him like 5 years before that. He was on CIA payroll for 31 years while he was dealing the drugs. But the CIA liked that because he was propping up the anti-communists, but because he was a nationalist, ended up fucking with our business. And in fact, Bush knew that because Bush was the head of the CIA in 1975, 1976. When Noriega was receiving money, Bush spearheaded the BCCI bank operation that funneled the CIA money to Noriega. The drug proceeds of Noriega.
And negotiations. All were rejected by the dictator of Panama, General Manuel Noriega, an indicted drug trafficker. Last Friday, Noriega declared his military dictatorship to be in a state of war with the United States and publicly threatened the lives of Americans in Panama. The very next day, forces under his command shot and killed an unarmed American serviceman, wounded another, arrested and brutally beat a third American serviceman, and then brutally interrogated his wife, threatening her with sexual abuse. That was enough. General Noriega's reckless threats and attacks upon Americans in Panama created an imminent danger to the 35,000 American citizens in Panama. As president, I have no higher obligation than to safeguard the lives of American citizens. And that is why I directed our armed forces to protect the lives of American citizens in Panama and to bring General Noriega to justice in the United States. I contacted the bipartisan leadership of Congress last night and informed them of this decision. And after taking this action, I also talked with leaders in Latin America, the Caribbean, and those of other U.S. allies.
So we ended up doing that. We ended up blackbagging Noriega and doing the regime change in Panama. And let me now turn a little bit to the Jeffrey Epstein side of this. So again, as we mentioned, Epstein literally said, I think it was Vicky Ward or Rolling Stone reported, Epstein told multiple people he was making a fortune out of drugs. Ghislaine Maxwell said his business was working with drug cartels, like the Sinaloa cartel. And with that in mind, I want to get to another one of these Jeffrey Epstein. Yeah. All right. So I wanted to get to Capcom and BCCI here. All right. So as we talked about previously in our Jeffrey Epstein cinematic universe, so we went over this, where Jeffrey Epstein gets to Bear Stearns in 1976, recruited by the then senior executive, Ace Greenberg, who becomes CEO in 1978. Ace Greenberg sets Jeffrey Epstein up with his daughter, so he's dating the boss's daughter. 1976, Bear's foreign exchange desk opens up an account for BCCI Luxembourg. BCCI, again, was set up by the CIA in conjunction with Pakistani intelligence, starting in 1972, but then scaled up ahead of the 1979, ahead of the late 70s Mujahideen secret support. And this was all very, I should note, this was all very hush-hush at the time about this CIA support for the Mujahideen. That was not declassified until much later. Here is, for example, Charlie Wilson. Here's one of the big cheerleaders for the Mujahideen in Congress, Texas oil guy.
Has the United States provided any aid to the Afghanistan people?
Well, that is a military secret.
Have we provided any aid to the Mujahideen, the Islamic terrorist groups fighting the Russians in 1980? And the congressman says that's a military secret. But in the background, it was Jeffrey Epstein, Ace Greenberg, and Bear Stearns who were indeed facilitating that aid.